But first, we start at the White House. President Donald Trump will mark his first 100 days in office with a rally in Michigan tomorrow and a message. Promises made, promises kept. But new CBS News polling suggests support for the president and those promises is slipping. Let's show you the contrast. Back in February, Americans gave him a 53% approval rating. Now that number is down to 45%. More Americans polled disapprove of the president's immigration policies. 51% disapprove, 49% approve. But more targeted questions specific to deportations and the numbers improved to 56% approval. That said, a large majority say the mistaken detentions and deportations of U.S. citizens is unacceptable. But the White House is doubling down on the justification for those deportations, going as far as to say putting up posters of arrested undocumented migrants on the White House North Lawn there. So let's bring in CBS News Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. She is there. Nancy, we can see those posters behind you. Why did the White House choose that spot? Is it because they knew that all the cameras were going to be there and they were going to get plenty of airtime?
That's right. All the networks, all the cable channels, we're all lined up in a row here on the North Lawn of the White House. And so the posters are lined up right behind us. And you can see each of them has a mugshot. It says arrested, and then it lists the crime that the unauthorized migrant was arrested for in the first 100 days of the Trump presidency. Violent crimes like sexual assault on a child, murder, rape. And the White House is making the case that President Trump is making the country safer by getting these people off the streets, Liz.
And Nancy, President Trump is set to sign more executive orders on immigration today. What do we know about those?
Right. So he's got a very busy day because he's going to be greeting the Super Bowl champion Eagles to the White House in the afternoon, then signing executive orders on immigration right after that. And the administration is going to be touting their first 100 days accomplishments all week long, but it is no accident that they are starting out today with this big push on immigration. We had a briefing with the president's so-called border czar, Tom Homan, first thing this morning at 8:30, where he made the case that the administration has effectively sealed off the border, and that's something you're going to hear echoed by the president himself this afternoon in the Oval Office.
And Nancy, in a sit-down interview with The Atlantic magazine, President Trump said, quote, "I run the country, I won the world." That interview was published today. What else can you tell us about what the president had to say in that interview?
Right. It's a pretty astounding statement, right? The president of the United States. Yes, the U.S. is often seen as the world's policeman, the most powerful country in the world. But for the president of the United States to come right out and say, "I run the world," that is a pretty bold claim. And it came in the larger context of the president telling these reporters from The Atlantic that he feels much more comfortable with the scope of his power in his second term, that he had people around him in his first term that he described in that interview as crooked, said he had to deal with that, and he was just in survival mode as a first-time politician. This time around, he said he's got people coming to him wanting to make deals, and that he feels clearly that he has a very expansive view of presidential power and that he isn't afraid to use it.
All right, Nancy Cordes live for us in front of the White House there. Thanks so much, Nancy.
You're welcome.
Well, hearing today in the battle between the Trump administration and Harvard, the school filed a lawsuit after the Trump administration froze more than $2 billion of federal funding. Now, the university previously rejected the administration's demands for changes to its admissions, hiring, and discipline policies to be in line with President Trump's ideals. Let's bring in CBS News Department of Justice reporter Jake Rosen. Jake, could this lawsuit set a precedent for other universities that oppose the administration's policies? Harvard's not the only one that gets federal funding.
That's right, and we've seen a lot of different colleges, whether it's Columbia University or others, get hit with kind of this dangling thread of either change your ways and kind of oblige by what we believe you should be doing, whether it's on research, on DEI, and what the Trump administration definition of that is versus other definitions. But there's also this conversation to be had too of how hard can Harvard fight back in this interim period? At the hearing today, the judge said is scheduling an initial hearing in this for arguments later in July. So at least it appears that this funding freeze is going to be in place till then. Very unlikely, just given that at least the pace right now of this case, that they will have their funding fully restored by the fall. But again, that's a lot of money that goes towards everything from future research that they're doing in the future to right now. And it really is a cost-benefit analysis that we've seen with these law firms as well, in which you have to decide whether to kind of go along with what the Trump administration is doing or kind of take the longer play here. And certainly this Harvard case is certainly the biggest and most important so far of the Trump administration using the threat of cutting off money entirely over institutions that typically have never been under attack like this.
And Jake, the Trump administration is facing another deadline this week in the deportation case of Kilmar Abbrego Garcia. Here's Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt this morning addressing the case.
Just to be clear, have there been any negotiations between the U.S. and El Salvador over his release or facilitating his release?
I will tell you what the president of El Salvador told all of you in the Oval Office. El Salvador does not intend to smuggle a designated foreign terrorist back into the United States. He is an El Salvadorian national. That is his home country. That is where he belongs. And the administration intends to comply with what President Bukele said of El Salvador. He does not intend to send that individual back.
So that's a no. There's been no talks.
What I have told you is that the president of El Salvador has made this quite clear.
Okay, Jake, so what's this week's deadline? And is this an indication that the DOJ is not going to comply here?
Well, both sides in this case, both the Department of Justice and attorneys for Abbrego Garcia, agreed last week on Wednesday to postpone a deadline for discovery or expedited fact-finding in this case. What is really at stake here is whether the Department of Justice cooperates on having additional members of the Department of Homeland Security, State Department, and others comply for depositions, and whether, after a judge in this case issued a rather scathing order, the Department of Justice complies by answering questions sought by Abbrego Garcia's attorneys. Those, at least as of last week, were not answered at all on Wednesday, and that's why the judge gave them extra time, very likely. But more to come in this case on that specifically, but there really has been no change from the White House or Trump administration on bringing him back, and we see them kind of parse words there, as even though the Supreme Court ordered the administration to bring him back as if he had been wrongly removed from the United States, we saw Caroline Leavitt say right there that is just not going to happen because they say that they have no power to compel his return. However, at least the judge in this case and other judges around the country have ordered there has to be some kind of production of these people for due process at one point or another.
All right, Jake Rosen, thanks so much.